Want to welcome you to the subcommittee hearing in appropriations. Today we're going to be talking about Medicaid, Department of Human Services, Child Protective Services, and the Department of Rehab. And first up in the batter's box, we have Medicaid. Drew, you're recognized.
Welcome back. You should all have an outline in front of you that I will be working off of today. And the first piece of that outline includes two tables titled 2023 and 2024. And these are the estimated expenditure tables for state fiscal year 2023 and 2024. Now, what is noteworthy here is that we initially projected a cash surplus for the Division of Medicaid of $495 million for the end of state fiscal year 2023. And we are now projecting a cash surplus of $652 million for the end of state fiscal year 2023. For state fiscal year 2024, using a level funding assumption of $900 million in state general funds and healthcare expendable funds, we initially projected a cash surplus of $183 million for the end of state fiscal year 2024. And we are now projecting a cash surplus of $403 million for the end of state fiscal year 2024. Now, why did those projections change so much? Primarily because the enhanced FMAP that we have been receiving since January of 2020 continued longer than expected. And then the second reason is because projected medical expenditures have not hit some of the actuaries' initial projections. We update our budget model periodically, and we will update the estimates again in March. I think what we may see is that the forecast will continue to improve in state fiscal year 2023. I'm less sure about state fiscal year 2024 because I think we are going to continue, some of the changes around the end of the continuous enrollment condition are going to be dependent on the approach, the federal regulatory agency, CMS, how they approach the unwinding of the continuous enrollment condition. Look, Mississippi Medicaid is in the best financial shape in its history. And that's in large part because of the legislature's support. You've maintained level state funding during the public health emergency, for the division, even as federal matching funds went up. And it's also in part because federal matching funds went up. We've been receiving a 6.2 percentage point enhanced federal match that was tied to 2020 pandemic legislation. And it's also, there are others, but in this, our customers, our Medicaid customers benefited too. Medicaid and CHIP enrollment is up 23.1% since March 2020. And the enhanced FMAP also allowed the hospital industry to save between $250 million and $300 million that they would have otherwise had to spend to fund their Medicaid add-on payments for MHAP and DISH, as well as some other Medicaid medical services. So what is next? A major focus of 2023 will be responding to the federal omnibus legislation that Congress passed at the end of December. The omnibus legislation unwound some of the COVID era Medicaid policies, including the continuous enrollment condition. If you want to look at the budget notes, this at the beginning, it gives a little bit of an idea of what Congress did when they started to begin the unwinding. And rather than end enhanced matching funds when the continuous enrollment condition ended, what they've come up with is a stair step model. So we're still under continuous enrollment, the continuous enrollment condition until March 31st of 2023. So in calendar quarter 2 of next year, states will continue to get to, will get to receive a 5 percentage point FMAP increase, on the condition that they meet federal eligibility determination requirements and those types of things. And that will continue for till it will be 2.5 percentage points in calendar quarter 3. It'll drop to 1.5 percentage points in October and go until December. And then at the beginning of 2024, medical services federal match will be back to that regular number, which I believe will be 78.57%. Eligibility redeterminations must begin by April 2023 and be completed within 1 year. As I said, enrollment has risen to record highs while the continuous enrollment condition has been in effect. We had 882,849 Medicaid and CHIP enrollees in December 2022, an increase of 23.1% since March 2020. At our current rate of spending, with level funding condition, assuming level state support funding. And when I say level state support funding, I'm referring to general funds and healthcare expendable funds, that 900 million or so a year that comes from legislative appropriations that makes up the lion's share of our non-federal share. As that continue, if that continued with spending trends around the same, utilization trends around the same, and not big shifts in reimbursement, we think the cash surplus would be depleted during fiscal year 2026. We are going to continue to include a risk corridor and capitation rates in fiscal year 2024. I think the state has probably seen some financial benefit of putting that into effect, although it may not always be that way. When enrollment goes, as enrollment goes down, and we don't think it's going to go down to pre-pandemic levels for quite a while, but as it does decrease, the acuity of the managed care population may shift, and the remaining individuals in the program may use services more readily. And there's going to be some, this period, there's going to be some level of instability in the member mix of the managed care population. So we're going to keep the risk corridor in there as a precautionary measure. We sent notices to award our coordinated care managed care contracts to 3 offers in August of 2021 or 2022 rather. That procurement is still in protest, and this protest could delay implementation of the new contracts until fiscal year 2025. Implementation of the new managed care contracts will coincide with implementation of a single pharmacy benefit administrator. Right now, each managed care plan, subcontracts, with another vendor, but across the Medicaid enterprise, we will be using the single pharmacy benefit administrator once this new contracting cycle starts. The new Medicaid management information system pays claims went live October 1st, 2022. Provider education workshops continue to be held, and claims payment percentages have steadily increased since go live. This morning, our long-term care, I was told our long-term care payment percentage is up to 94%, and pharmacy reimbursement payment approval percentages are higher than they were on the previous vendor. Requests for approval enhanced payments for emergency ambulance services that has been sent to CMS, and payment and provider tax collections on those will begin once approvals are received. GME, graduate medical education utilization and costs continue to rise. We're looking at a $5.2 million increase in 2024 due to utilization and the FMAP changes. And we're also looking at another policy change on reimbursement that may lead to a $2.2 million increase. These are state share changes only. The graduate medical education program has, we feel like, has been a real success, and will be a pivotal part of Medicaid playing a part that it can legally play in facilitating more doctors coming to Mississippi and staying in Mississippi. We have also put out a request for approval of what's called an 1135 waiver. It's a waiver that during a state of emergency or public health emergency, states can send to CMS for certain flexibilities. And we've done that for hospital payments. We've sent that to the Medicaid chairman to review as well. Our current estimate of the benefit to hospitals of this one-time payment, which would be tied to fee-for-service utilization, would be $70 million. We are looking into options for other ways to increase hospital payments. But I would have the caveat that our options are limited due to federal regulations, as well as current hospital payment levels. On the fee-for-service side, hospital payments are limited by what's called the federal upper payment limit, and it's based on what Medicare would pay for certain services. There is more flexibility on the managed care side, and what CMS has done is historically allowed payments up to the average commercial rate. So the average commercial rate that in a state, that they would pay for inpatient and outpatient services, and that gives you a little additional room, but not unlimited room. I think one thing that's important to bring up about some of the changes that are going on with the changes in the FMAP is that hospitals receive about $750 million annually in add-on payments from the Division of Medicaid through the DISH and MHAP program. But hospitals, they also fund the non-federal share of those add-on payments with provider assessments. So when I talk about $750 million, that's the gross benefit of the payments, but you have to subtract the non-federal share, the part that that goes to non-federal share, as well as the 74 million or so that they pay in to support general Medicaid medical services. But what's happening here is that during the public health emergency, when the FMAP was up, yeah, as you see in this last bucket, this chart, what they were paying on the bed assessment, that assessment that goes for it's what they use non-Medicare inpatient bed days, and that's funding that the Medicaid program can use for general medical services. That's gone down to 70 from over 100 million to 74 million. And that's going to tick back up about $15 million in the first full year. And their non-federal share payments for MHAP and DISH are going to go up too. So while they did receive a nice break, as anybody that was paying non-federal share of for Medicaid expenditures did during this time of enhanced federal match, it's going to go back up. So I think that's something that you will probably hear a little bit more about. So you're in a very interesting position. This large cash surpluses in an agency give you a lot of flexibility. I would say I think it's a good opportunity to look at things that can help propel the program forward. And it's also important to keep in mind that a lot of we're in a great condition right now, but we may not always be. So in making decisions, what's a one-time change versus what's recurring, and if we can pay for it today, can we pay for it in 2027? So yeah, with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Drew. I just want to compliment you and your staff that's with you. You guys have had a busy summer or off season, I'll say, between the sessions. I think you've accomplished quite a bit administratively, and personally, I want to thank you and recognize you for that. We've had, during the course of the summer, we've had a number of discussions on reimbursement, not only to hospital, but to all providers. And again, on that front, I know the department's been taking a look at how can we increase the revenue streams to the hospitals. And again, I know they appreciate it. With the latest action by the feds, are we still in the PHE?
Yes, we are. So what the omnibus did was it decoupled the public health emergency from the continuous enrollment condition as of March 31st of 2023. I know they're discussing right now how long the public health emergency may continue, but those are now two different. Certain they're now decoupled, at least with respect to the eligibility pieces of Medicaid policy.
All right. Does that also then affect the postpartum care piece? Because that, I don't know, I can't remember if that was tied to the PHE or
it will. The omnibus legislation made permanent the state option to extend postpartum from 60 days to 12 months. Under previous law, there was a sunset. So if you were going to do it, it was going to expire. The federal authority to do it was going to expire in 2027. States would have to come back and get a waiver. So they made that permanent. So if a state decided to extend postpartum, there's not a concern that, oh, well, it may go away at the federal level.
Right. And then budgetary wise, if we were to extend postpartum, I think the numbers I saw it's going to cost us about 7 million state funds.
7 million in non-federal share. That's right.
Do committee members have questions? Senator Wiggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Drew. To your point about procurement, managed care procurement being in protest, and I assume there's also that alone. How much is that costing and legal fees? Can you, if you can say?
I'm not sure. I would, I need to go back and see what we have budgeted for that. It's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but, you know, depending on how, we do have outside, you know, counsel involved.
Hire outside counsel?
Pardon?
You hire outside counsel for that? And is that, does that come out of your budget that we give you?
It does. It's 50-50 match.
So, do you have a line item of how much you spend on defending procurement protests across the board?
No, but we will, I don't at this point, I don't believe, but that's something that we can get, and probably is relevant because, you know, procurement protests have become the new normal at Medicaid. If we don't do an invitation for bid, it's a good chance the RFP is going to get protested.
Right, which means that that's money that you're spending to defend the lawsuits.
That's correct.
Yes, if you could get that, I mean, email's fine by me or whatever, but just on that, if we're across the board, are we talking about hundreds of thousands, or are we talking, because I'm sure it's not just managed care, I'm sure it's other stuff.
It's hundreds of thousands. Now, I will say that there's also a value in the time that we have staff working on this too.
Sure.
And typically they're pretty they're, you know, some of our very strong staff. Yeah. So yeah, there's opportunity cost in there too.
So what's the average Medicaid person on an hourly rate, let's just say?
The average person.
Well, let me do this. Can you give me that to factor in employee time spent on that?
Yes.
Okay. My next question is, how much is in the cash surplus, did you say? And you said for 23 and 24?
We're expected 652 million for year end at for 2023, 403 million for year end 2024.
And if I understand you, you're saying that's up to us, the legislature appropriations, to decide how to handle that.
Sure, you can change if that we're saying that's the assumption that it would be 900 million again, but you could go lower. You could go 600 million, and then you would have a $102 million year in surplus for 2024.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Butler.
So we release in our budget book, and we may even have, we submit to ELBO every year, the legislative budget request, and it's got 34 different modules with different information in there. We may have something about procurement protests in there. I'd have to go back and check, but what we would do in this case, and with Senator Wiggins, we're going to send him that information, and so we would be happy to include you and anyone else there.
Senator McClinton. Thank you, Drew. Appreciate it. Next up, we have the Department of Human Services. Mr. Anderson, you're recognized when you're ready to go.
Make sure that mic working. There we go. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. I'm just going to walk through our slides, and then as we go, if you have questions, certainly we'll talk about those as we go. This is the overall budget request for DHS. Our 2023 appropriation, 74,189. We're asking for a significant increase of about 17.8 million. And I'll walk through what those increases are. And then there's $58 million there. You see that state support special. That is some capital expense funds, as well as the 54 million that the legislature previously approved for us regarding our legacy replacement project, which we're calling the Success Project. And as you know, MDHS is highly leveraged with federal funds. About 8% of our overall budget is general and state support funds, and then the balance, 92% there, is federal funds that essentially flow through our agency out to the various populations that we serve. I want to mention briefly in regard to our budget requests, what our staffing looks like. We have 1,471 permanent full-time positions and 516 time limited positions for just under 2,000 authorized positions. And that sounds like a lot until you get to the next slide. And well, it's not in the next slide, but I'll get to it in just a moment. We have a severe staffing shortage at MDHS right now. We have approximately 500 vacancies. So a good bit of the funding that we're asking for, the funding increase that we're asking for, 6 million of that is for salary increases. There it is in that second bullet item. 506 vacancies that we have. And what I want the committee to understand is that the vast majority of these vacancies, they're not in the state office. They are out in the county offices that are spread out all over the 82 counties of Mississippi. So almost all of this funding increase that we're requesting is money that will be spent out across the entire state. We operate on a 50-50 match for essentially all of our eligibility and administrative staff. So with the $6 million increase that we're requesting to fill these 506 vacancies, there will actually be over $12 million invested all across the state in each of those 82 counties by all of the eligibility staff that we have we actually have 84 county offices because we have 2 counties that have 2 offices. So another one of the big pieces of our increase is something you've heard from us in the past. This is the Adolescent Opportunity Program that is our youth services request. We are asking to reinstitute the adolescent opportunity programs all across the state. Now, what are those? Those are community-based services that will essentially help us to divert youth from the juvenile justice system. We believe that's how it has worked in the past. We partnered with 20 various different agencies and nonprofits to provide local community-based programs for at-risk youth and even those who had been adjudicated delinquent, to keep them in their home counties so they didn't wind up either in a county detention center or where they ultimately wind up at Oakley Youth Development Center, which is the last stop for juvenile delinquents who have progressed up in the system. This adolescent opportunity program is targeted for at-risk youth, 12 to 17 years of age, and would provide things like family therapy, individual therapy, group therapy, academic support, vocational training, and substance abuse treatment. It would give local youth courts a continuum of care that they simply don't have right now, to divert some of these youth out of the juvenile justice system and keep them in their communities. Because the more youth that we keep in their communities and engaged in their communities and in their schools, the more likely they're not going to wind up in juvenile detention. And ultimately, when they graduate out of juvenile detention, we know they wind up in the criminal justice system. So I want to give you a brief update. Mentioned already our success project. Again, that's our legacy replacement project. Now, I know this slide is a little bit busy. This is the timeline for the entire project, from the planning, advanced planning document approval. That's the document we have to submit to our federal oversight agencies. And that would be the Office of Child Support Enforcement and the Food and Nutrition Service at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This is projected to be about a 3.5-year project altogether. We are right now in what we're calling the procurement and federal approval phase. That began the first of this year, and it will run through about September 30th of this year, when we hope to have not only published the RFP, but granted a contract, awarded a contract for the design, development, and implementation of this huge success project. Just to remind you what that does, that would replace our 4 eligibility platforms that we have right now. We have a child support, we have a child care, we have TANF and SNAP, all independent eligibility platforms that we will integrate. And more importantly, we have almost 40-year-old, 35-year-old systems installed in the late 80s, early 90s that our staff are working with, and this will bring them into the 21st century with new hardware and newly integrated eligibility systems. Now, the success team, that's the team within our agency who we've dedicated to this project, both the project management piece of that, as well as the programmatic staff who are working with the IT staff. They have initiated all the necessary processes to begin project implementation by October of this year. Project implementation in the sense of building these new systems. And once the implementation begins, we expect it to be concluded by June 30th of 2023. The Food and Nutrition Service, or FNS, has approved the feasibility study. They've gotten their comments back to us on the implementation advanced planning document. As you know, in these big federally funded projects where we partner with a federal agency, or in our case with 2 agencies, they had this requirement of these advanced planning documents. This whole thing started with something called a advanced planning document. That's how much we have to get a head start on planning with our federal oversight agency and then getting their approval. We're working on some updates to the cost allocation model that FNS has shared with us, and expect to get the comments that the responses that we need to give them by the end of this week. As you know, with any project that involves IT, we have to involve ITS in this state. And so the design, development, and implementation request for proposals, the RFP, we actually completed that a couple of months ago. We got it over to ITS, and they had a little bit of a delay in getting an analyst assigned to begin to look at the RFP that we had drafted. I had a conversation with Director David Johnson yesterday. He assured me that they would have an analyst assigned by today to begin to work on our RFP. You know, we cannot release an RFP until ITS gives us their approval. So the federal partners also require something called an independent verification and validation. That'll be a separate vendor who is basically serves the function of a quality control measure while the design, development, and implementation is moving forward. The IV&D vendor, when we select that vendor, will be the one who makes sure we're keeping that timeline I shared with you earlier. We completed the RFP for that IV&D vendor last month, and we're waiting on federal approval for us to then submit it to ITS for them to approve it. Overall, that timeline that I shared a couple of slides back it's intact, and we expect to finish this project on time and within the budget that we have projected for it. In order to do that, we need to maintain the 58 million. Now, what that number represents is the legislature originally awarded us $5 million in capital expense funds in order to do the study, the feasibility study, and select an option to move forward with designing a new system. And then you awarded us $54 million for the state match for what will go with $100 million from our federal partners. So what we're asking that you continue to fund us the remainder of that $5 million. There's about 4 of that left, and then the $54 million that was awarded to us in this current fiscal year, so that we can move forward with completing this long overdue legacy replacement project it's just essential to the continued ability of this agency to do business with our client populations. I want to mention one other piece of legislation that has an impact on our funding. There is a child support incarceration bill that we will, I don't think it's been dropped yet. It has been, okay. It has already been dropped, but basically we have to pass this legislation regarding incarceration. This is a federal requirement. This is not something we made up. The federal final rule regarding the child support program that we operate with Young Williams is overseen by the Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement, which is part of the Department of Health and Human Services. They adopted a final rule actually about 3 or 4 years ago that says states cannot treat incarceration as voluntary unemployment and continue to participate in the federal child support enforcement program. What does that mean for us? Well, it means for the Department of Human Services, the potential loss of $35 million in federal matching funds if we don't get this piece of legislation enacted this year. Now, just so you know how much it impacts our overall caseload, and we have well over 300,000 families involved in the child support program. If the incarceration bill passes, it will only impact about 3,200 cases, which is less than 1.5% of all of our child support caseload. However, if we don't get this incarceration bill passed, it will impact 100% of our child support cases because the feds may decide to pull our matching funding. And the formula is 66% federal money, 34% state money. We could not operate the child support enforcement program without that 66% of matching federal funds. This is what the language of this proposed piece of legislation does. It basically says for any period exceeding 180 days, when a person who is ordered to pay support is incarcerated or involuntarily institutionalized, that their obligation to pay child support will cease while they're incarcerated, unless we're able to determine that they have other means to pay support while they're incarcerated. I think for most of our prison population, they don't fit that category, but there may be some who do have independent means. If they're incarcerated, their obligation would continue. And even though the incarceration language we're looking for would suspend the child support obligation while that non-custodial parent is incarcerated, that obligation will resume the first day of the month following a 60-day period once the person gets out of incarceration. And we will continue to enforce the child support orders and make any necessary adjustment, administratively adjusting the arrears balance for child support that is suspended under this incarceration bill that we're asking the legislature to enact. And again, I say to you, we have to have this bill in order to continue to have the funding that we need. Otherwise, if we were to try to operate our child support program without any federal funding, we would be looking for 2/3 of the funding from this body. We pay our child support partner, Young Williams, about $20 million a year to operate that program. So we would need about 2/3 of that 20 million in state funds if we lose our federal matching funds in order to operate the program. Another thing I want to mention, we talked about this back in the fall when we appeared before the Senate Committee on Women, Children, and the Family. We're required by the Office of Child Care, which is another one of our federal oversight agencies within the Administration of Children and Families, which is part of the bigger Department of Human Services. We're required to periodically do a market rate survey to gauge what the actual costs are for child care providers to provide child care. We had not done one in the last, many years is it? Last 3 years. So we hadn't done one during the time I had been executive director. We did a market survey last year, back in the summer and fall, I guess it was, right? Okay. We worked with the Social Science Research Center up at Mississippi State. They determined that our monthly rates right now, which are $480, need to go to $600. Am I right about that, Chad? $600 per child in order to be at the market rate. And we are required to raise our rates, the reimbursement rates for child care providers, to the market rate. We don't get an increase in our Child Care Development Fund block grant in order to cover those costs. But we are required, now that we have done a market survey, to implement that increase in our voucher amounts. And we'll be doing that. When are we planning to implement that? Okay. So before the end of the current fiscal year, we'll be implementing that new voucher rate. Now, again, on child care funding, we are planning right now to use about $43 million, $42.9 million in discretionary dollars to cover these increases in our voucher payments. But we can only cover those with ARPA funding until September of 2024. And we're going to need then to replace that $42.9 million to continue serving the children that we currently serve. If we don't get increased funding, we're at risk of having to drop 12,470 children from the voucher program without any funding. We're all asking the legislature to consider a couple of things here. One, if we reallocate this discretionary funds to other projects that we are considering, for example, a child care substitute employee registry and some training for child care providers, then we need this $42 million from the legislature so that we can continue with those discretionary fund projects that we had previously discussed with the Women, Children, and Family Committee. And if you want some more detail, we can provide you the detail on those different projects. The issue is that as soon as we raise our rates, we're going to be facing a choice about either continuing to help child care providers along the lines that we had agreed to do, or dropping children off of the child care voucher rolls without some additional funding. So where's the bottom line here? Bottom line for us at MDHS is we are requesting a general fund increase of $17.8 million for the fiscal year 2024. We're asking reappropriation of that $58 million in capital expense funds to continue overhauling our legacy systems and to keep that project on track on the current timeline. We need this child support incarceration bill so that we're not at risk for losing $35 million in federal funds for our child support program. And by July 30th of next year, we're going to need, and we're doing this in the sense of giving this body advance notice that come July 30th of next year, if we use all of our ARPA funds to continue funding vouchers at the new market rate, then by the end of next federal fiscal year, we're going to have an infusion of $43 million, or else we're going to be dropping a lot of children off our child care voucher rates. And just a small figure there, we have some deficit appropriation authority that we need just to pay some outstanding invoices that didn't get submitted during the fiscal year that they were incurred. So that's the summary of what DHS is asking you for this year. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Bob. So if I'm looking at this, you're asking to almost increase your staff by 25%. You got about 2,000 now, you want an additional 500?
No, sir, we're not asking to add 500. We're asking for funding so we can fill those 500 vacancies. We have 506 vacancies that are included within those allocations. The allocation that we currently have, the 1,987 that we have, from that number, we have 506 vacancies right now. So we're just, because of SEC squared and some adjustments to salaries, our eligibility staff, Senator, have been, some of them have been working 3 decades for less than $25,000 a year. And we've gone to SPB and we've got a proposal that they're supportive of that will raise those eligibility staff salaries. And that's those folks that all over the state in all 82 counties will raise their salaries ultimately to a starting salary of about $31,000, which is a significant increase for them. But we need it. We have a 20 to 25% turnover rate among that staff. That's why we have 506 vacancies. We spent about $5 million last year just treading water, hiring people that were replacing people who just left, hiring people who stayed with us 2 to 3 months because of the salary structure. So that $6 million we're asking for is to bring those eligibility employees up to a more reasonable salary so that we can fill these 500 vacancies that we have.
Can you even fill those vacancies? Are there, you have the human resources out there to?
Well, I mean, we're in the same position as every other employer right now. It's difficult. We are filling positions. We're filling some positions. We filled about 100, I think, in the last couple of months. Now, I'd like to see that number double, but you know, the salary, I think, is a big factor there. I mean, we have people who come to work for us who could walk down the street, as you well know, to Wendy's and get $15 an hour in some areas. And, you know, we're paying them at $24,000 a year. That's barely $12 an hour if they work a 2,000 hour work year. So.
If you had the salary scale where you could attract the people, would you actually still need the 500 additional people?
Yes, sir. I think we would, because we have some county, I can tell you, we have one county that's operating with a single employee, a county director who is managing the entire county caseload right now. We have other counties that are 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 12 staff positions vacant and trying to operate. I was in Bay St. Louis last week. We have Bay St. Louis in Hancock County being assisted by other staff who come and work 2 days a week from Jackson County, from Pearl River County. And it's all because we simply don't have these positions filled. I think in all candor, we probably with the funding could fill pretty much all of these 500 vacancies. And like I say, most of those are going to be out in the county, scattered out across the state, where the you know, the rubber hits the road. That's our frontline staffing. Those are fairly, those are the sources of most of our complaints from our client population. I can't get a hold of a caseworker. I can't find my eligibility worker, because we have eligibility workers who are, you know, in better days, their caseload was 200 to 400. We have some caseworkers who are trying to manage 700 to 800 cases. And it's just simply overwhelming to them.
On your adolescent opportunity program, you got a figure of 9 million. Is that part of your budget request, or is that part of that?
That is part of our budget request. Yes, sir. Our youth services division, we have essentially we have a little bit of social service block grant money that we use within our youth services division, but for the 95% probably of that division's budget is state cash. So
with that 9 million, is that part of the 17.8 that you?
it is. Yes, sir. It's in there.
And then when you say you need to reinstitute the program, the statute is good. You just need the funding. Is that correct?
The statute reads subject to funding. And what happened, Senator, was in 2017, I believe it was, the Administration for Children and Families made a hard line, bright line decision that TANF funds could not be used for adjudicated youth in the juvenile justice system. We had been using some TANF funding, and when ACF says, nope, you can't use TANF for adjudicated juvenile delinquents, this program essentially went away. And so we're asking for state cash to bring it back. And we are exploring the possibility of converting some TANF funds to social service block grant. We have the ability to convert some of that, but in all honesty, it won't be very much, because we anticipate needing to convert some of our TANF funding to child care development funds in order to be able to, you know, tread water essentially with the child care program.
On your success project update, you know, we're trying to catch a number of our agencies up. I know a lot of you may be the worst operating from the 80s. All I would ask is that you have consideration for the stakeholders involved and you communicate well. Some of the other slips I think we've had is just people know we're going through this change and there's a lot of hiccups that you go through, but people have to have a person that they can touch base with, when they have a problem. And just you have that consideration as you go through that change here.
Yes, sir. That's one of the other staffing issues we're dealing with. We pulled programmatic staff onto this success team, but we didn't have the luxury of leaving their positions unfilled. So we are backfilling the people we pulled to work on the success project at the programmatic level to be able to do just that, to make sure we don't lose ground with our clients and that they, to the extent we can, that they have somebody they can reach out to.
All right. And then would you let me know if you get your analyst assigned today or not?
Yes, sir. I will.
On your child support incarceration bill, I think Senator Wiggins has already filed that bill. He's indicating he has, so we'll be good there.
Very good.
The increase in the voucher amounts that you're going to need, you mentioned going from 480, I think, to $600 for a total of 4.42 million, almost 43. Is that going to be needed in this upcoming budget? From looking at the data, I think we got a year to wait, or a year at least to prepare.
Well, we're kind of at a place where we have a Hobson's choice to make, and that is we either use the money we have in the way of ARPA money to cover the new voucher costs, or we do something to increase the quality of the child care providers by helping them with scholarships, with a substitute registry and so forth. We can get through with the ARPA money we have until September of next year, but we may not be able to do much. I had appointed a child care expansion advisory team within the agencies, and these were some of the things we were going to do with this discretionary money. If we have to, we can divert it to paying vouchers. But as I say, it's a Hobson's choice. Neither one is my preferred choice. To look at losing children is the biggest concern I have. We want to keep as many children on our voucher program as we can.
Senator Butler.
I'm not sure I'm following you, Senator, in terms of the changes to the agency as a whole. I mean, we have progressed through what I called Operation Restore Trust in terms of making a significant number of internal control changes. We changed the way we award subgrants. We are monitoring all our subgrantees. We are doing quality control reviews at the programmatic level now. So all of those things have been implemented and we're moving forward. The design, development, and implementation project that's mentioned here is for replacing all of those old computer systems that are 30+ years old.
This at present time, what areas are lacking service in your local agency?
In the county offices?
Yeah.
That you're asking? Yes. Well, all of our economic assistance programs are administered at the county level. So the SNAP program, the TANF program, child care vouchers, are they handled at the county level? They're handled through the state office. Child support, there are regional offices that Young Williams operates, but that's at the county level. There are 24 child support regional offices out in the state to which people can go to get child support assistance. So it's primarily our economic assistance programs. Our community services program operates through the state office, through the Division of Community Services. Our child care voucher program operates through the state office, through the Division of Early Childhood Care and Development. What else am I leaving out? Youth court is statewide. You know, we have youth court services workers in every county that work with every youth court judge or referee. If the county doesn't have a youth court judge, then we work with the youth court referee that's been appointed by the chancellor in those counties. So we have youth service workers all over the state as well at the county level.
So are you saying that there are many children are lacking service because of lack of individuals to do the job?
Well, what I'm saying is their services are not being delivered at the speed at which we would like to. Yes, they're experiencing a delay in the review of their case file. They're experiencing a delay at times in the recertification when their time comes to be recertified on SNAP or TANF or whatever. We're covering it as best we can, and we occasionally throughout the year have been sending, we call them SWAT teams, basically out to the county from the state office to help catch a county up if they get behind and they're just, the ox is really in the ditch and they need some help. We are sending some short-term assistance to them. But yes, because of staffing, there are delays in the delivery of service across the state.
Senator McClendon. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Senator. I appreciate your time. Thank you all.
Next up, we have Child Protective Services. Good afternoon. Is a little green light on? Is it a green light on?
That work?
It works.
That worked. Okay, thank you. All right, I have just a very brief handout for you, and I plan to talk pretty succinctly and then leave time for questions. So certainly if I'm not as thorough as you would like, I will be available to answer anything you want. Our request this year is we've asked for $127,273,722 in state funds. That is an increase in our general fund of $15,159,398. I'll start to round these numbers off. There are two reasons for two primary budgetary costs to our agency. One is staff, because we take care of children and it's a human endeavor. We can't do it without staff. The other is the cost of living for children. So when inflation hits hard like it has this year, it hits us. We are required to modify our foster care subsidy payments in accordance with inflation under the Olivia Y lawsuit. And so part of the increase is based on the fact that inflation jumped from around 4% when we made our first request to you to around 8% now, or actually, I think right at 8%. We're also asking you to fund increasing our adoption subsidy payments. The agency pays subsidy payments to foster parents when they take care of the state's children. And then if those foster parents adopt that child, which is the ultimate goal, if they can't go back home to their parents safely, then we also pay an adoption subsidy. While we've been increasing the foster board subsidy payments because the lawsuit required us to, we have not paid attention to the adoption subsidy rates. And so they haven't been addressed in years. They're somewhere around, or have been somewhere around a third of what our foster board payments are. It creates an artificial incentive for courts to keep children in state custody for the sole purpose of making sure that family has adequate funding to take care of the child. So this is money we're already spending. We're just spending it in the foster care lane. And my proposal, we're trying to reduce barriers to moving children to permanency in one way or another. So while I say it's cost neutral, I believe that shortening the period of time children are in state custody is the key to us having some sort of control over staffing needs and what happens to children while they're in custody. That's the primary increase that we've asked for. We do ask that you reappropriate our capital expense funds. We are in the middle of an ongoing legacy replacement project. And we, as an update, we have selected a vendor now. We've reached a contract and we have confirmed all the requirements. And we are in our second month of design sessions. So we are actually in the building phase. We're working with a company called Redmayne. And we've reached a stage in the process where we're starting to see the fruits of labors, but it has been it's been complicated to get to that point. We are building it's a cloud-based, and I'm about to tell you all the tech words I know, and there will be few. But it's a cloud-based system, it's low code, no code. And so it's going to be much simpler for us to make changes to the system, to change our reporting, to pull data when we need it, and basically to very nimbly track where our children are. I think it also offers opportunity as we build out other legacy systems in the state to begin to plug into this more modern technology in a way that I think offers opportunity to start to connect the technology that can break down, the big word right now is silos between agencies. But so we're really pleased with the progress we're making there. We expect to complete that project in spring of 2024. I will tell you that I believe that's a little bit of an overly aggressive timeline on the part of our vendor. I think that I'll be really happy if we have it completed by fall, but I do plan to have some deliverables that are functioning by spring of 2024 for certain. I mentioned the lawsuit. Olivia Y has been around now for 18 years. I've given you data in the past about the cost of that lawsuit. We know that we spend roughly $6 million a year simply in fees to both pay the plaintiffs to sue us and pay the defendants, pay attorneys to defend us, as well as paying monitors to monitor us and tell us whether we're succeeding. We're in a different posture in that lawsuit right now. We have stayed what the state agreed to in 2016 until January 31st this month. So we've been operating in a time period where we had limited metrics to meet so that we could begin to actually change the system that's causing the metrics to be unmeetable. In fact, next week I will be in New York with the plaintiffs and the monitors, working out the next phase of how this exit from litigation will look. It's not an exit, just to be clear. This is what I see as the first step towards an exit. We needed time in which to make some fundamental changes to the system. We've made a number of those changes. We are still making those changes. I believe that I've demonstrated consistently to the plaintiffs' attorneys that we are headed in the right trajectory. But I'll tell you, like I tell them, you do not change a system this size that has this many multiple components overnight. I think that our data is going to be compelling, but I don't know that we will meet every metric when we go up there at the end of January. One of the big metrics is getting enough caseworkers where the children are. I mentioned that one of our primary costs is salaries. We can't do this job without having people where our children are. We take care of live souls. That's a 24/7 job. We have to respond when reports come in that a child may be being abused or neglected. That is a first responder job. So we're running a 24/7 first responder agency on what really is more of an 8 to 5 regular old state agency model. So getting people in place that can do what I think is one of the hardest jobs in Mississippi and getting them to stay is really critical to us delivering good care to children. We have managed within our existing budget to work with SPB and the SEC squared transformation to get our bottom salaries up to something that is still not exactly market rate around the Southeast, but it gets them much more competitive. So we're getting them up to a bottom rate of somewhere around $37,000. These are college degree people who have full-time responsibility for about 20 kids, if our caseloads are set right. So we've gotten those bottom salaries up, and we've created a career ladder within the SPB transformation that gives us incentives for people to stay with us. There's a ladder to climb. It gives them incentives to improve their skill set and their knowledge base. So we used the structure as it was already set up so that we could start to, pay more if somebody goes and gets their master's in a related degree, if they stay with the agency longer. So we've made some consistent strides on meeting caseloads. You'll see on the back side of this one pager that I just wanted you to have. It's hard to have completely current data because our numbers change daily. But we have around 3,647 children in custody. We also take care of another 3,622 children in their own homes. So courts order us to monitor or report back about a child in their own home and provide services. That's an additional, so that gets us to somewhere around 7,000 children. We have about 1,600 open investigations right now. Some of those are counted in our custody numbers, but most are not. So just to give you a good idea of the volume that we deal with, in half of a month, we fielded about 590 calls. In these graphs down below, you'll see the trends over time. And so it's a very high volume of work, and the volume and the rate that it comes in at is something that we don't have complete control over. If a need is out there and a person calls in, we have to be there and answer the call. We have gotten our caseloads to 62% met. That's a metric that is established by the Olivia Y lawsuit, by the state's agreement with the plaintiffs in the Olivia Y lawsuit. At some point in time, we have to get to 90% of our caseloads met. There's some strategy to that. Part of it is having better control over how long children stay in custody. We have places in the legal system and the legal path to permanency where children get hung up. Right now, kids have to go through 3 separate causes of action to get from the front door of our agency when they initially come into custody to get out the back door in an adoption setting. Now, they might return back home safely earlier than that, but getting a child through the legal system through 3 separate causes of action with 3 separate petitioners and 3 separate types of attorneys representing the petitioner is a logistical legal nightmare, to be honest. It is pretty amazing that kids get adopted in this state through the foster care system. I will tell you that we have made it, we basically taken a hammer and chisel with the tools we have available to us and focused heavily on moving what I consider a backlog of kids from just that we inherited. There was a pandemic. There are a lot of reasons that there are a lot of kids who've waited a long time to be adopted in our system. And I'm not interested in pointing fingers about that, but we just started really taking it down as granular as each child and looking at why they're stuck in the system and starting to move them through. I'm very pleased to tell you that last year, last state fiscal year, roughly 600 kids were adopted in Mississippi. This state fiscal year to date, we've had 644 adoptions. In this roughly 25% of those adoptions occurred in the last 2 months. We began what we call a commitment to paving a path to permanency, whatever it takes. Looking at internal processes and any delays that we might be causing ourselves. Also working with the legal system and starting to eliminate those barriers. Back to that adoption subsidy, creating some parity between what we pay for adoptions versus what we pay for foster care. Again, it's money we're spending as a state. If a child is in the state's custody, he belongs to all of us, and I'm your agent to take care of that child on our behalf. And while children are in our custody for unnaturally long periods of time, the state has a ton of exposure. The state has a ton of exposure when a child's in our custody. But if they only need to be there for 18 months to keep them safe, that's how long they need to be there. They don't need to be there an extra 8.5 years. Does not do them any good, and it is not good for, it's not fiscally sound. Costs roughly $40,000 a year to take care of a foster child. But it's also not good for children. It's not good for their stability. They need to be in a permanent home as soon as possible. So I'm happy. Those are not necessarily parts of our budget request, but it's sort of an update on where we are as an agency and the foundation for why we need money, need additional money, and why we would be asking you to pay someone close to the same amount that we already pay to adopt a child. They have to have fostered a child for 6 months in our system before they are eligible to adopt a child. So we're taking a system where we require fostering, and that's based on some federal regulations, and then dropping off that financial support so significantly that, and I'll tell you, this came to my attention from a single parent, school teacher, fostering 3 siblings. Hard to get somebody to take care of sibling sets, and it's so important to their development. They were doing beautifully. She wanted to adopt the kids, and a judge called me and said, she can't afford to go from, he told me the total amount of her subsidy at that time and what it would go down to. And so we started digging around and realized we're paying maybe a third. in adoption subsidies, that creates an incentive for people who make fantastic families, love and care for children, but are on a limited income. School teachers and social workers, you know, you add 3 kids to the family and that is a big, significant financial impact. So I will open the floor for questions. I've hit on a wide variety of topics.
Thank you, Andrea. Do you happen to know how much in reappropriation for your CWIS system as well as for the ARPA funds?
Yes, sir. The CWIS funding is 13. We're spending that as each month as we go, and we're actually spending it at a much more rapid clip at this point because we're in the design work. But we're starting this year out with 13 and some change.
Then how about the ARPA?
ARPA, we have just under 60 million that you appropriated. We have not been able to draw any of that funding down yet. We're working weekly and daily with Horn CPA Group to, you know, they're the third party administrator. And we think we're close on our first draft. So, you know, understandably, they want to be very sure that we're spending it on allowable purposes, and we want to be very sure. So everybody's learning a little bit with this federal funding stream. It's different than most of the streams we use.
Lastly, I had heard, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but are we using TANF funds for payroll?
Yes, sir. When the agencies were joined, that funding, as far as I can tell, TANF has been used for the functioning of child welfare purposes and other purposes within the larger umbrella agency. It's hard to say how much in the past, but I believe that's what precipitated the financial crisis that you all were told about around 2018. You agreed to split the agencies. The state agreed to do that in a settlement agreement, a binding settlement agreement with the plaintiffs and Olivia Y. And I think TANF was probably part of the equation internally with that split. The way we've solved that right now is that Mr. Anderson and I have a interagency agreement that he transfers TANF money. We use it for only certain types of employees that are involved in preserving the family. One of the 4 tenets of TANF, the 4th one, in fact, is basically means preservation of the family. And so we kept it tied to salaries because we felt like it was cleaner and easier to track. All of that's in magic, and everyone's very sensitive about how TANF is spent. We're being upfront and across the board about it. I would be very happy not to use TANF money for that purpose. I would need additional state funding to decrease dependence on it.
It was my understanding that it was supposed to be a temporary arrangement to start with. Is that yours as well?
I don't know that we've gotten that far along in communication about it. No, sir. I would tell you that this agency has not been well funded for the purpose it's asked to perform. And that is one of the, you know, I'm asking for an additional 15 million this year. My budget is, I mean, Tennessee runs on a budget of $1 billion for child welfare. Much bigger state, a lot more kids. I'm glad we do not need that much money. But I will tell you that funding on this program and taking better care of kids on the front end is an investment that I think the state can't afford not to make. I don't know how much TANF money was used. It was hard to track previously, but there are types of employees in our agency that screen cases before they come in or work with families in the home prior to taking custody. And we've designated those salaries because they fit within that fourth tenet of TANF. Other states use TANF money for child welfare or to supplement what they spend on child welfare. So it's legitimate use. I would be very happy not to take TANF. I'm just telling you, I really would need additional general fund.
Thank you. Other senators have questions? Senator Butler?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, say that last part. How long have I been over the agency?
How long have you been over this agency?
Since November 9th of 2020, but I'm not counting. I just made it 2 years. And so I've hit the average length of stay. I've learned a lot in those 2 years, and it's been kind of painful learning. And I feel like I'm maybe starting to get a little bit of a handle on it. So I actually would think I'd like to stick around for a little while and see if we can't really improve this system.
All right, and I can appreciate that. And one of the reasons I asked that question is because see, these funds are not going to be generated as we need them. We go and find another bucket, take them out. So now I guess what we need from every agency is what would be your recommendations to make the agency more efficient, and then be able to take what we have, what you have coming.
Yes, sir.
And use that to apply in a way that you can continue to operate stably.
Yes, sir.
You know.
That's an excellent question, Senator Butler. And I'll tell you that generally speaking, there are about 5 different sources of revenue that we haven't tapped well traditionally as a state. One is there's a federal funding stream called Families First Preservation Services Act. It's an act that was intended to shift 4E funding towards prevention work, getting upstream of the problem and preventing children from coming into custody unless it's absolutely necessary for their safety. So Mississippi elected, before I took this position, not to pursue that funding stream. There was sort of a myth that it wasn't worth it was too much work for the funding that it produced. I think, the name of the act is the Families First or Family First Preservation Services Act. I think it got sort of tied up in all that stuff that happened with the TANF money. All that to say, it's an excellent funding stream. It does take a good bit of work, and it's complicated. States have had to most states file a state plan 4 different times with the feds before they get it approved. However, the funding stream brings down uncapped funding, and in 2025, our match will go to the FMAP, which is what Medicaid enjoys. So in terms of our work, it is some of the most heavily subsidized federal funding that we receive. On average, we're able to draw down about 40% in federal funding to your 60%, your 60 cents. And that's it. I don't understand why that program's like that. I think this was an attempt by Congress to remedy some of that and to shift the focus to prevention work. So we will be, in fact, we have our first draft that we plan to file this spring. I fully anticipate the feds will have a lot of questions, but we do have the advantage of being one of the last states to apply, so we're learning from the other states. We also have what the judiciary committees, Senator Wiggins has heard me talk about the legal path to permanency. Keeping children in custody only as long as they need to be is critical. It costs us $40,000 for every year they're with us. That's on average. The ones that are really hard to place and really expensive are the ones that also tend to stay in our custody the longest. And so taking a child from their parents and moving them through the system is an inherently legal process, and it should be. Should be hard to take somebody's kid. And judges ought to be making the final decisions about a matter that serious with good evidence and input from other parties. So we are looking at ways to reform the legal system. First step is for us to be recognized throughout the entire 3 causes of action as a represented party so that we can file motions if we need to. Right now, I don't have a voice in the court system until you get to termination of parental rights. So the first cause of action, which has a lower bar for evidence, a preponderance of the evidence to take a child, and I'm not a party and I don't have a voice, I can't do much about the case unless I just have developed a great relationship with the judge. But that still means that if my worker disagrees with the judge or disagrees with the GAL and they have good reasons for that, we don't have a good way to assert that right now. So I will be asking that this body clarify that if we have legal and physical custody of the child, that we have a voice in the court. And we can appeal an order if we have good cause for doing so.
Senator Butler's welcome to vote in favor of the bill when it comes before him.
I'm telling you, it will, there should be very, 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 very few circumstances where children stay in the system longer than 2 years. And I have kids who have been waiting with the same family that they've been fostering with for 10. We just had a mass adoption in Hines County. One sibling set that had been in that family for 10 years and one that had been there for 12 years. The family wants to adopt. Getting past TPR is hard, and it should be. Should be harder than taking someone's land. So if you come to my house and want to take my kids, I expect you to prove up a lot of good evidence, and that I've had due process in court. So that these disjointed legal matters create a lot of delays in keeping kids in the system. The other revenue sources that I think are on the horizon are when you reduce the length of time kids are in stay, you cut off $40,000 for every year on average. And then in the ARPA funds, we're using that money to incentivize flipping a care delivery system from right now what is a very acute care heavy system for mental health. We got hospitals all over this state that'll take the Medicaid DRG to treat a child for 7 days, and then they spit them back out. And I'm not blaming them, but the issue is that we don't have the right supports or the right step down levels of care. Acute care is not the answer. And we don't have some of those levels of care in Mississippi. I can start to create some of those levels of care with that ARPA funding. The Families First Preservation Services Act brings with it funding for a level of care that's similar to PRTF, but not exactly. It allows me to fill some gaps in the system. And so it'll take me a couple of years to get the structure in place to do that, but it does bring with it a funding stream that can supplant what we're talking about using from ARPA.
Thank you very much. And I think that you have, I heard what say it, but I think that you have to put or make stronger recommendations to us as to what needs to be done so that we can look to you for results as a result of those things being done. And when it comes to making decisions, our decisions will not be made based on whether or not we'll be elected. It'll be based on what is best to make Mississippi a stronger place.
That's great. We're probably pretty aligned then. I'm not running for office, and I really do want to make a difference before I leave this system. And I promise you, I don't want to run for office. This smoothing out the path, getting kids to permanency faster is where, if I had to tell you one thing that would make the biggest difference, it's moving kids efficiently through the system. And long-term, I'm going to tell you that a uniform court system to do that is the key. And I agree with Senator Wiggins on that matter. I'm not in a place yet where I'm ready to tackle that. I got enough, I still got to get some fundamentals right in my own agency. And the system is not just the court. There are multiple issues. So I feel like I need to get is it the moat out of my eye before I look in someone else's? I don't know what that means, but I think my mother used to say it.
Senator McClendon, and in the interest of time, we're getting pushed up against the clock. If you could maybe just limit it to.
Real brief. Yes, sir. Director Sanders, thank you for your commitment to these children and the families and your employees. Real quick, when a child, and I'm not an attorney, so bear with me. When a child, there's suspicion or there's an arrest of a parental figure, they go to a local interview, and we're blessed where Senator Blackwell and I are from. We have a fantastic
Children's
group
Advocacy
there,
Center.
Healing
Yes,
Hearts.
sir.
But their funding was cut off federally.
Yes, sir.
Does that fall under, does that need to be changed, a state law? Because these places are critical, because it's the start of, this child's process, and they're in a trauma situation at that time. How can we be more efficiently and fund these places?
I met with Chairman Hobson yesterday and a group with the Children's Advocacy Centers, and I really appreciated that opportunity to pull everyone together in the room. You're talking about children who have very specific and they've suffered very likely severe trauma. The Children's Advocacy Centers help interview, they do forensic interviews for children, which is a very different thing than the investigation that happens on the front end. When we get in there and we discover that there's been sexual abuse or witness of a murder or a death, severe trauma situations, not neglect, then those kids need to receive a forensic interview. In the Children's Advocacy Centers, we have a pretty good network across the state. We have a few areas that are uncovered. I don't know financially what the answer is. I do think that those VOCA funds are going to build back up. I think, that is a natural funding stream for that type of work. If the state has funding for it, I know that it has sent funding through the Attorney General's office. And every opportunity when I'm asked whether or not I support their work, I absolutely do. I don't want to give them any of my money, but if you gave me money to give them, I would certainly, their work is important and it does not step on our toes. It helps enhance what we do. And they bring a specialized type of interview to a situation where not only are they doing the interview in a way that's designed not to cause more trauma to the child, they're able to capture it in evidence in a way that it can be presented in court later to again reduce that. You know, before we had these centers and some statutes that the legislature passed. When I was first a social worker in the early 90s, kids just had to get on the stand in the room with their perpetrator. And there really was no way around that. So I don't know how to tell you where the money comes from. I can tell you I support that they do need to continue their work.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. I appreciate you coming in.
I'm also happy. I give my cell phone number out. If you think of questions you wished you'd asked, 601-665-5690. And sometimes it, you know, no, sir, 5690. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Adding cleanup today, we've got Chris Howard in the Department of Rehab.
How's everybody?
Doing good.
Am I the last one for the day? So I determine what time y'all go to dinner? Oh, good deal. All right, for y'all that don't know me, I'm Chris Howard. I'm the Executive Director of the Mississippi Department of Rehab Services. With me today, I've got Andy Sallin, who is our Finance Director. In addition to that, Kevin Bishop is our Deputy over Workforce. Billy Taylor in the back is our Chief of Staff. Joyce Williams is our HR Director. Samandra Murphy is our Director of Disability Termination Services. And Miss Anna Tucker and Miss Christy Embry are our legislative folks who are here every day to help y'all with constituent issues. So those are the folks I've got in the room today. And what I thought I'd do is kind of hit some of our programs rather quickly. And then Andy is going to talk about our actual budget numbers. So if you flip over to page 3, our agency is responsible for serving Mississippians with disabilities. We provide individualized services because every individual is different. So despite their disability, everyone needs maybe different services. So everything we do is individualized. When you look over on page 3, these are our vocational programs. So you've got vocational rehab and vocational rehab for the blind. And these are the programs where we're assisting Mississippians with disabilities in an effort to help them obtain, maintain full-time employment. So these are folks who want to go to work, have a disability that's an impairment for them reaching their employment goal. And through the services we provide, we can help those individuals reach that employment goal. So for fiscal year 2023, the year we're in now, we're actually on track to serve about 17,000 individuals. That's adults and youth. In addition to that, we're on track to put about 3,000 Mississippians back to work. So that's 3,000 Mississippians with disabilities that we plan to help get into the work world, become taxpayers of the state of Mississippi, and also hopefully reduce public assistance if those individuals are on that. ROI, the third bullet point you see there, Mississippi State University through InSpark, they do a return on investment study for us. And what they came back with when they did their the last study was the return on investment for the Mississippi taxpayer was 2.5. Basically what that means is for every dollar y'all provide us in state general funds through our vocational programs, once we put an individual back to work, you get your dollar back plus another $1.50. That's through state income tax, that's through reduction of public benefits. So, you know, we like to show that, you know, our programs do pay for themselves. So again, y'all give us $1, we give you back $2.50, your dollar plus another $1.50. The topics there on the bottom, the program highlights. These are some of the things we're doing in our vocational programs. I know y'all have heard me talk a lot about Project Search. This is a program that we really, really like. And this is a program where we're working with young adults. We partner with a business, and these young adults are doing a school year-long internship and gaining valuable work experience. So something we're really excited about. We've got 18 sites serving over 100 kids, and we plan to expand that year after year. So again, something we really like, something that really provides a lot of opportunity for young adults we serve. In addition to that, internships, something else we're really pushing hard in the vocational side. We understand that people with disabilities, you know, want to get that valuable work experience. So by offering an internship, It's a win-win situation. The business, we pay the wages. So it's basically free labor per se for the business to where they're, agreeing to train those individuals. The individual we're serving is able to earn a little money while they're progressing through their case, in addition to gaining that work experience. So something we're really excited about there. The pre-employment transition services, this is where we're working with young adults and getting them ready for the workforce. I know y'all talk about getting into the schools, working with young adults, getting them ready for a career. So through our pre-employment transition services, we are actually working with the schools to help those individuals get ready for a career after school. So some really good stuff going on there. Flipping over to page 4. These are our waiver programs. So I know y'all had Drew speak to y'all earlier through Medicaid. We operate 2 home and community-based waiver programs, which is through an interagency agreement with the Division of Medicaid. We are on track this year to serve 4,000 Mississippians with significant disabilities. These folks are basically nursing home eligible. So through the funding y'all give us through these waivers, we are able to provide the opportunity for individuals with significant disabilities to live at home as opposed to a long-term care facility. So, if you think about that, if you've got a loved one who has a significant disability, wouldn't you much rather have that person at home with you as opposed to a long-term care facility? So through these programs, through the funding y'all provide us, 4,000 Mississippians will be able to stay at home with their families, with their loved ones in their own homes. In addition to that, those 4,000, we also provide additional services. We do a lot of home modifications, vehicle modifications, durable medical equipment. When I say home mods, that's building ramps, that's widening doors, that's rolling showers, lowering countertops, whatever that individual needs to live safely in their home, we're able to do that. The bullet point, second one from the bottom, this is from Medicaid's federal reports. My understanding, they show $45,000 in savings by operating the waivers. So, this is pretty cool because at any given time, we have about 2,300 folks daily on a waiver. So if you take 2,300 times 45,000, that's $103 million savings to the Division of Medicaid. State match on that is about 19 million. So if you'll give me just 10% of that, I'll go home. All right, try to joke there, it didn't work. Last thing, this is our waiting list. We've got the waiting list actually down to 550. I know years ago, I think 3 or 4 years ago, Senator Wiggins, when we were here, I think the waiting list was about 2,000, over 2,000, 3,000. So we've actually been able to get that waiting list down to about 550.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. And that was done because with your focus, and then we appropriated money to get to those wait lists.
That's right.
So, and then I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but 550 built into that is a certain attrition rate. So
yeah, back during COVID, our attrition rate unfortunately was about 20%. Actually, this year it's 6%. So we're actually losing only about 6% of the individuals we're serving, which is really good. But again, when you talk about individuals with significant disabilities, a lot of times with compromised immune systems, unfortunately, we lost a number through the COVID years.
And if I can say, if I may take a point, you helped with one of my constituents. I don't know if you know this, but spinal cord injury, you helped, but she passed away at the end of the year. But you made her life better, and she passed away from her spinal cord from complications from her injury, but you were able to give her certainly at least 10 years worth of life.
Yes, sir.
So, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because these programs really, truly do change lives. When you talk about the 4,000 we're serving here, these are 4,000 lives that are able to live at home. And again, through the funding, through, the ability to increase the slots, like Chairman Wiggins mentioned, we've been able to touch a lot of lives and really been able to keep people at home. It's really a great program. Flipping over there to page 5, this is the disability determination services. So this is the program that's funded through the Social Security Administration. It's 100% federal. There are no state dollars. The number of people applying is actually down. We're about 55,000 cases right now. Years ago, we were up to like 80, 90,000. So it's gone down some. We're down to 55. The processing time about 192 days, which I'll get into that in a minute. The really cool thing is that third bullet point, accuracy rate is 93%. So this is really good to know, because what happens is when our examiners make that determination, whether somebody's eligible or not for Social Security disability, 93 times out of 100, they make the right decision. So they work really hard to review all the medical evidence, make those determinations. And I'll tell you, it's not an easy job. There's a lot of ifs and whats and things like that the examiners have to go through. And to get a 93% accuracy rate is really a good thing. The next bullet points to there. I always like to show this number. $300 million a month comes into the state of Mississippi through disability payments. So, you talk to different people. Some people like disability, some people don't. But regardless of what someone's view is, you think about $300 million coming into the state of Mississippi through disability payments. That's a lot of money coming in, funding our state's economy. And then the last bullet point you see there, we do partner with Social Security Administration, Office of Inspector General, and law enforcement agencies to create a cooperative disability investigations unit. So, you sometimes you hear on Dateline or 60 Minutes about fraud in the program. And, this unit is responsible for taking tips, reviewing different types of evidence, and making sure that the people who are on disability truly are disabled. So that's kind of a thing we partner with to keep people honest, so to speak. Flipping over to page 6 and staying with the DDS program. This is something I've talked to a few of y'all about before the session, and something I want to make y'all aware of. When we talk about our disability examiners, again, these are the folks who are reviewing the medical evidence to make those determinations for Social Security disability. Last fiscal year, the starting salary was about $28,000. Prior to COVID, we were able to recruit and retain people at that starting salary. However, after COVID and the mass exodus of the workforce and everybody having to spend more money to get quality employees, we are finding that it's very difficult to recruit for that. Social Security Administration this past year gave us $4,000 to increase those salaries. In addition to that, I was able to take advantage of the 10% in-range adjustments that y'all allowed us to do through Personnel Board. So we've been able to get the salaries up from $28,000 to $35,000. So the starting salary for examiner is $35,000. However, if you look under section C, we are still at the bottom when you look at our region under Social Security Administration. So Kentucky's paying 47, North Carolina 44, Georgia 43.9, and so forth. So my goal is to try to get examiners up to around 42,000. I'm not here today to ask you for anything particular related to that. We've got a meeting with State Personnel Board next week to discuss options. We're continuing to talk with Social Security Administration to see the best way to get those salaries up. But I may need to come back to y'all end of February, 1st of March, around budget season, and come with a formal request to try to get those salaries up. But right now, we don't know what the best possible way to do that is. But hopefully through our meeting with Personnel Board next week, and again, talking with Social Security, I can give y'all a good idea of the way to do that if y'all are okay with doing that. Flipping over to page 7, this kind of shows you the impact of the examiner losses. In 2021, our net loss was 8, 2022, 34, so far in 2023, and this is based on the federal fiscal year. So this is from October 1 to now. We've lost 8. So we are actually down 50 examiners from where we were back at the beginning of 2021. So it is an issue we're working hard to address. Luckily, y'all gave us the ability to do the 10% in-range adjustments through Personnel Board. So we've been able to take advantage of that. However, we're still trying to get those numbers up to, try to get enough examiners in to make these determinations and make them in a timely manner. So that's kind of the programs. I was going to turn it over to Andy and let him talk about the dollars, unless y'all have any questions related to the programs.
sensitive that is. All right, appreciate it, Mr. Howard, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate your time. I promise I'll try to make this as quick as possible. I know it's kind of late in the afternoon, going through our financial numbers and what our requests are this year. If I can direct you to page 8, top right, 34.2 million. That is the Budget Committee's recommendation for state funding for our agency for 2024. 30.6 of that is general funds and 3.6 is healthcare expendable funds. What we're requesting for 2024 in additional funding is 2.6 million for a total of 36.9 million in state funding. That additional 2.6 will help us accomplish 3 objectives, and I'll go into a little more detail in just a second on the following page, but just at a glance on this page, 424 million will help us meet the match on the Section 110 grant, which funds our vocational rehab and vocational rehab for the blind program. 785,000 will help us fund 150 additional slots for the home and community-based waiver program. And we're also requesting an additional 1.4 million, which would allow us to increase the hourly wage for our personal care attendants by $1. So again, 2.6 million is what we're asking in additional state funding for 2024. Page 9 or slide 9, we just go into a little more detail on what we're asking for. The first point with the 424,000 that we're requesting. Traditionally, each year, we receive a 3% cost of living increase from U.S. Department of Education, which provides our Section 110 grant. So that 424,000 would be the state match needed on the additional 1.5 million in federal funding that we would receive from the Department of Education. Would also note that that 424,000 would help us meet the maintenance of effort agree or stipulation that's imposed on that particular grant. The second objective, 785,000, that's the amount that we estimate it would cost us in state funding to add or serve an additional 150 slots on our home and community-based waiver program. That would be the match on the other source funding that we would be billed to Medicaid, Division of Medicaid. Last point with the 1.4 million that we're requesting. Our personal care attendants, or PCAs as we refer to them, these are our direct care providers for our home and community-based waiver program. They are non-state employees and they're paid an hourly wage of $10.50 per hour. We're hoping to increase that wage to $11.50, an increase of $1 as we work to try to improve retention and curb the issues we're having with hiring and keeping good individuals as they find more lucrative work forms of employment. I know that situation is probably not unique to us. I think everyone's kind of experiencing that at this point, but to do so, to increase that wage, we estimate would cost us an additional 1.4 million in state funding. Next slide just kind of shows in total what our request is, both state source funding and special source funding. You can see on the left there is the committee's recommendation, a total of 246.7 million for the year. That's 212 in special or other source funding, and then the 34.2 in state. Add in the additional 2.6 that we're requesting for 2024, and that takes us to a total of 249.3 million. And then the last slide is just a slide we like to throw in there. It basically just shows a comparison of our state source funding to federal and other source funding. We're currently operating at a 14 to 86 split, which means for every dollar we spend, only 14 cents is state funds, and the remaining 86 cents would be federal or other source funding, or I guess depending on how you look at it, for every 14 cents we spend in state funding, we're able to utilize an additional 86 cents in federal funding. So all that to say, we like to think we're a pretty good bargain between those numbers there and then the InSpark information that Mr. Howard referenced earlier. You know, we think we provide a pretty decent bang for the buck, so to speak, at least from the state of Mississippi's perspective on the funding we utilize and the services that we do provide. So with that, I'll let Mr. Howard close it out for us.
Thanks, Andy. So, I mean, just to close it out, again, everything we do is centered around serving a person with a disability. Through those 4 major programs, again, thanks to the support of y'all, we are able to touch a lot of lives, and everything we do is to try to make an individual's life better who has a disability, whether it be prepare for employment, whether it be to be able to live at home with their families or qualify for disability payments, which helps put food on the table for a lot of families around our state. So the work we do, we take very seriously, and it truly does change lives. So thank y'all for the opportunity to come speak today and tell you a little bit about what's going on in the Department of Rehab Services.
Senator Butler.
That is, really have several problems.
Increase in salaries for the personal care attendants. Yeah, that's what we're asking for, the $1.4 million. So what we can do is fund that through the Division of Medicaid. So the way our waivers work is y'all give us the state match, which allows Medicaid to draw down the federal funds. So if y'all agree to let us increase personal care attendant rates by another $1, then we would need the $1.4 million of state match. Right, yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, sir.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, thank
Short and
y'all.
sweet, so appreciate it. This meeting will be adjourned.